Hi everyone. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Pickleball is rage these days, and we have a small league in our community where I live, and so we also get together. And I wanted and play pickleball over the weekend, sometimes on Fridays, and so I wanted to make it more little more streamlined on who's going to show up and maybe organize social event around it. I thought I would build a web application or a web page around it where people can RSVP and that we can have count of who's going to show up, and then when we do a social, then we can get count of food items to bring, and then keeping into mind the dietary considerations, restrictions, so on and so forth. So with that in mind, I was thinking of building a web page like this, which users would enter their information, and then we'll store in the database, and then we can have a way of looking into who's registered for that event and things like that. So here is the architecture that I was thinking. Every application should start with, and mostly starts with end user in mind. So we start with end user, and that end user will fill out the form that is fronted by CloudFront. Um, and then the website I was thinking would be hosted on S3 to keep the costs low. And then we will use API Gateway to connect to Lambda, and Lambda is where all the logic will reside and the code would reside to kind of put that data that we receive from the users to to a document database or NoSQL database, DynamoDB, fully managed by AWS to keep the cost low. So serverless. So the entire platform would be serverless to keep the cost low. And then we might end up hooking Power BI to look at who signed up and things like maybe create dashboard or something like that. So that is what I am thinking to build. And in this specific video, I'm going to focus on building just the API gateway and the Lambda interaction. And then over next maybe video or maybe two videos, I'm going to build the front end part of it, and then maybe the back end. So I haven't decided whether I'll split into one or two videos, but that's what I'm going to do. So in this video, I'm going to build API gateway and then call Lambda from it, and make sure that that integration is all set. And that way, we can lay the foundation for what I'm going to build. So thanks again. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the hands-on part of this. Thank you. All right, so let's start with the hands-on part of this video. So I'll start with creating Lambda function. So really basic, simple Lambda function. So I'm on AWS console, and here I also have on another tab a web version of Postman also. So I'm going to back to console and start with Lambda. So click on Lambda here. And our scenario is kind of RSVP. So I will just create a function, and I'll give the name RSVP RSVP Lambda, and we're going to use Python. So I'm going to use Python 3.14. I think rest everything I'll just leave it as is. And there is a couple durable execution and EC2 capacity provider. There are two new custom settings, but we don't need those for our purposes. So we'll just create the function here, and I'm going to copy basic code which will kind of print the input, and also in the logs as well as return the output as well. So once we get into the code, then we'll update it there. Okay, dismiss this. Waiting for the code source page to panel to kind of populate. Yeah, it's really slow. All right, so we have the function here. I'm going to replace this with a function that I updated. What it essentially does is prints the event, and then I'm expecting name as one of the component within event, and then I'm going to return whatever was submitted in terms of name for RSVP. And as we create the form, we'll add more fields to it here, and then to the downstream database that we want to update. So let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to deploy this. Okay, it's successfully deployed. So let's go ahead and test. So, but I need to create a test event, and I'm going to create new test event, and I'll call it RSVP test event. And I'll just make a minor change here, and I'll make it name. I'll put my name here, and then I'll save the event. Okay, so that's saved, and I'm going to execute the test. So click on test here. Ran successfully, and so you can see that it is returning you submitted with the name, and also in the logs it is writing the event itself and then the name part of the JSON. So now we have our Lambda working just fine, so we can go in back here. So now let's go back to our main part of the console of AWS console, and now we'll create the API gateway and tie the API gateway to this Lambda that we just created. Um, all right, so I'll select API gateway here. All right, and then I'm going to create API here. So go to API, and I'm going to choose REST API. So we're going to build REST API, and we'll call it new API, and then we can say RSVP API regional endpoint. So is going to be US East 1, IPv4. So we'll just create API here. So RSVP API is created. Um, Now I'm going to okay. Now I'm going to create a resource. So this is backslash domain, and I'm going to create a resource here, and we'll call it resource, and we'll call it RSVP ACK acknowledgement, and we'll create the resource here, and then within that we'll create a method here, and we will select the post method here, and we'll have Lambda function triggered based on the input. So US East 1, and we created our RSVP Lambda, so we'll pick that. We'll update the request body because we are expecting JSON, so we'll just add model, and we'll say application JSON and leave this as blank, and let's create the method. Okay, so everything is created, and we need to deploy the API, so we'll go ahead and deploy, and we'll create a stage. So we'll call the stage as in our case we'll call it dev. Okay, maybe let's write all lowercase dev and deploy. Okay, so now we have our API deployed, and so this is our invoke URL. So we'll use this invoke URL, and we'll go to our Postman, and we'll paste it here. Already selected post. We have JSON here, so we'll type in the JSON. Shukla from Postman, and we are going to post against this. So let's go ahead and post. So it's sending the request and it returned said you submitted Nilesh Shukla from Postman. So it did process. Now let's go ahead and check on the Lambda side whether it processed what we expected. So we should be able to see in the logs. So I'll open a new tab. And here is our RSVP Lambda. Okay, so we have our function here. So let's go ahead and look at the monitor tab. And let's go click on view CloudWatch logs. Okay, so you can look on this within this Lambda, the log group, and there's the log stream. So if we open the log stream, we should expect to see, okay, so we have Nilesh Shukla from Postman. So that's showing up here. If we want to try one more time, we can click on, say, number 2 here, and then send the request. Okay, so it returned here, and then we should be able to go in here and also see the request there as well. Let me refresh. Okay, so there it is. So I think what we built here is there is API gateway, which you can invoke through HTTP endpoint, and it triggers Lambda, and then Lambda is writing whatever was submitted through that HTTP JSON through that endpoint, and it's printing and returning back. So what we need to do is we need to build front end and the back end. The back end is where Lambda will write to DynamoDB whatever was submitted through the form, and on the front end we need to create a form which will call this API gateway hosted HTTP endpoint and send the data that way. So that is what I'm trying to build here, just so that we learn more about how all these AWS services are integrated. So thank you, thanks for watching, and I'll shortly build part 1 and part 2, like the front end, back end, and so that will give us the complete picture. Thank you, thanks for watching.